The wind swept across the sun-baked plains, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and the faint echo of distant drums. In the fading glow of evening, a young woman rode atop a tired horse, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and stubborn defiance. Her name was Leora, a girl of 16 summers, with hair like burnished copper and eyes sharp as desert hawks. She had grown up knowing the harsh ways of frontier life, where law was fragile and danger lurked behind every ridge. Yet nothing in her quiet village prepared her for the journey that now lay ahead, a journey that would carry her far from the familiar fences and hearths of her home into a world ruled by strength, silence, and survival. She clutched the reins with trembling hands, aware that every hoofbeat on the dry earth echoed a fate she had not chosen. The townsfolk had whispered rumors of the man who awaited her, a fearsome Apache warrior whose reputation cut through the whispers like a knife through canvas. His name was Tay, a man whose mere presence commanded respect and dread, whose eyes seemed to pierce the soul of anyone who dared meet them. Leora had only seen him once from a distance, during the fleeting chaos of a market raid, yet the memory haunted her with an odd mixture of terror and fascination. It was said he honored strength and courage above all else, but kindness and mercy were treasures few ever glimpsed in his company. The path she traveled wound through canyons of ochre stone, shadows stretching long beneath the dying sun. Each bend of the trail brought new reminders that the frontier was not forgiving. Leora had been warned to expect hardship, yet the stories told at home never spoke of the loneliness that clung to the air, the endless quiet that pressed on the chest like a heavy stone. As night threatened to fall, she noticed the subtle signs of movement among the rocks, a flash of fur, the rustle of leaves, but dared not turn her head. Her thoughts drifted unbidden to the life she had left behind, the small cabin with its worn hearth, the laughter of younger siblings echoing down dusty corridors, the gentle guidance of her father's hands. All of it seemed impossibly far away now, slipping into memory like smoke curling toward the sky. Despite the fear tightening around her chest, Leora carried a spark that refused to die. She had been raised on stories of resilience, of girls and women who faced storms, hostile lands, and impossible choices and emerged stronger for it. Her mother's voice, firm and steady, reminded her always, "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to face it when all else whispers to run." And so she rode onward, each step forward a rebellion against the helplessness that threatened to overtake her. By the time she reached the edge of a narrow valley, the moon had begun its silver climb into the sky, casting the desert in ethereal light. Shadows moved with strange purpose, and the wind carried unfamiliar scent smoke, the iron tang of horses, and something wilder, something ancient. Leora's horse shied nervously, ears twitching, nostrils flaring. It was here that the tales she had been told seemed to converge with reality, where the line between myth and truth blurred. Somewhere in the dim light Tay waited, a figure as commanding as the land itself, wrapped in furs and painted with the symbols of his people. His presence was not cruel nor kind. It simply was. And that, more than anything, unsettled Leora. For she knew that a man who existed in harmony with the harshness of the plains could not be easily swayed by tears or pleas. Her arrival did not go unnoticed. From the rocks above, a pair of sharp eyes observed her every move, noting her careful posture, the tension coiled in her shoulders. There was silence at first, a quiet that felt louder than any shout. Then came the sound of a horse approaching, slow and deliberate. Leora stiffened, gripping the reins so tightly that her knuckles whitened. As the rider emerged from the shadows, the moonlight revealed the face she had imagined countless times, now closer than she had dared to think. Tay's gaze met hers, steady and unyielding, and in that moment Leora felt the full weight of her new reality. The stories she had heard, the warnings and whispers, had all led to this single point. And yet, despite the fear, there was a strange, unspoken acknowledgement passing between them, a recognition that each understood the other in ways words could not convey. The night air hung heavy with tension. Leora's mind raced, imagining the possibilities that lay ahead, none of them certain, all of them dangerous. Would she find herself trapped in a life she could not endure, or would the unknown reveal strength she did not yet know she possessed? The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the promise of trials and the hint of unexpected turns. Somewhere beyond the darkness, the fires of a distant camp glimmered faintly, casting shadows that danced like phantoms across the rocks. Leora's journey had only begun, yet already the plains had shown her that life could change in the blink of an eye, and that every choice, even those forced upon her, could carve a path she'd never imagined. As the first stars appeared overhead, Leora tightened her grip on the reins, her pulse quickening with the mix of fear and determination. She had been sold into a world of uncertainty, a world ruled by a warrior whose intentions remained as mysterious as the night itself. And in that moment, with the moon rising high above the endless plains, she realized that her fate, once thought sealed, might still hold surprises she could neither foresee nor resist. The first meeting between the young bride and the fearsome Apache warrior was about to unfold, and the outcome would change everything. The canyon seemed to hold its breath as Leora's horse drew closer to Tay. Every step echoed against the stone walls, a reminder that the land itself was witness to this meeting. She had ridden many trails in her life, but none carried the weight of inevitability like this one. Behind the stoic mask of the warrior waiting before her, she sensed a story, one written in scars, silence, and the endless rhythms of the plains. He was a man shaped by hardship, yet there was a stillness in him that hinted at an understanding beyond words. Leora's own heart beat with both apprehension and curiosity, as though the land demanded she see beyond the fear whispered in every story. Long before this moment, Tay had forged his path through the untamed stretches of the American frontier. He had grown up among mesas and deserts, learning the language of survival from elders who spoke in lessons of wind and fire. His childhood had been a testament to endurance, days of endless heat, nights where coyotes cried and the stars burned bright in the inky sky. He had become a man of few words, his life measured in acts rather than explanations. His loyalty reserved for those who proved themselves brave. Tales of his courage had spread across distant settlements, leaving villagers and travelers alike to wonder if the stories were legend or truth. Now the girl before him carried the weight of her own story, one that had begun in a quiet town, safe behind fences and firesides, and now teetered on the edge of the unknown. As they approached one another, the canyon air thickened with anticipation. Leora's mind wandered back to her father's warnings, to the long talks under the wide prairie sky about the world beyond their homestead. He had told her of men like Tay, men whose strength demanded respect, whose decisions shaped the fates of those who crossed their path. "The world is wider than our fences, Leora," he had said, "and sometimes it asks things we are not ready for." She had nodded at the time, imagining distant mountains and endless plains, but nothing could have prepared her for the weight of that knowledge now. It was one thing to hear of danger and quite another to feel it pressing close, tangible and patient. Tay studied Leora in silence, noting the set of her shoulders, the cautious fire in her eyes. There was a balance in her posture, a combination of fear and resolve, as if she had already begun learning the language of survival without realizing it. The girl's presence challenged him not as a threat, but as a question. He had encountered many travelers, settlers, and wanderers, yet few had come with the quiet strength that Leora carried. Her fear was real, but so was her courage, and Tay sensed that the road ahead would test them both in ways neither could foresee. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of distant cedar smoke from the high mesas. Somewhere above, a hawk circled, its shadow flicking across the dusty ground like a living reminder of the untamed world around them. Leora's horse snorted nervously, and she tightened her grip on the reins, willing herself to stay calm. She thought of the cabin she had left behind, of the quiet mornings and the laughter she had known. Everything familiar was gone now, replaced by the vast emptiness of the frontier, where every sound and movement could hold either threat or promise. She understood, in a way she could not yet name, that this meeting with Tay was only the first step into a world where survival was earned, and trust was harder still. The canyon walls seemed to press inward as if the land itself wished to test them. Shadows pooled in the hollows, and every movement of a distant branch or ripple of dust carried significance. Leora tried to steady her breathing, aware that her next actions would shape not only the path she traveled, but the way the warrior viewed her. There was a tension in the air, a fragile balance between caution and curiosity, and she knew that one misstep could change everything. Yet even as fear pressed against her chest, she felt a spark of defiance, a quiet voice insisting she would meet this challenge with the strength she had inherited from the generations before her. Tay's horse shifted beneath him, and the soft scrape of hooves against stones seemed louder than any shout. His eyes, dark and unyielding, held a weight of expectation. He made no move to speak, but the silence itself spoke volumes. Leora realized that here, in this vast and unforgiving land, communication often relied on more than words. Actions, posture, patience, and observation carried meaning as clear as any sentence. She straightened in her saddle, sensing that this was not simply a meeting of strangers, but the first turning of a page in a story neither fully understood. Night deepened, and the first stars shimmered overhead, cold and bright against the endless dark. Leora's thoughts swirled with questions she could not voice, with fears she could not name. The plains around them seemed to whisper secrets of survival and destiny, and somewhere deep in the shadowed canyons, the faint glint of a distant fire hinted at lives lived beyond the boundaries of her memory. In that moment, Leora understood that her journey had only just begun, that the path ahead would test her in ways she had not imagined, and that Fearsome, silent, and enigmatic, was the key to the next chapter. The night held its breath, the canyon waited, and the young bride's fate hung on the edge of uncertainty, poised between the world she had known and the unknown that stretched endlessly before her. The first night in the canyon passed slowly, the cold seeping through Leora's thin cloak as she sat on her horse, eyes fixed on the shadows dancing beneath the moonlight. She could feel the weight of Tay's gaze without seeing him directly. And in that quiet, she understood the subtle rules of the land. Nothing was wasted, nothing unnoticed. Every sound, the scrape of stone, the distant howl of a coyote, the whisper of wind through the canyon carried meaning. Wondered what he thought of her, whether he saw only a frightened girl or glimpsed the stubborn fire she had carried from her home. The thought both comforted and unsettled her. Tay, for his part, had never faced a situation quite like this. He had known the plains' harshness, had navigated raids, storms, and skirmishes. Yet the arrival of Leora brought a complexity he could not measure in strength or skill alone. Her presence disrupted the familiar rhythm of his life. She was not like the travelers or traders who passed through. She carried a story, a past that tugged at him even as he maintained his distance. He could see the fear in her posture, the careful way she studied every ridge and shadow, but he could also see the determination that refused to break. That contradiction both intrigued and challenged him. While the night air thickened, distant memories stirred in Leora's mind. She recalled the market day that had sealed her fate, the loud clamor, the cries of animals, the sudden shouting as strangers had come to claim her. There had been no time to resist, only the echo of her father's voice calling after her. "Stay strong, Leora. Remember who you are." Those words had been her anchor through the long ride and now through the first encounter with Tay. The girl's heart clenched at the thought of home, of familiar walls and soft light, yet she also knew that her path had diverged into territory she could not return from. Every step forward was a step deeper into a world of uncertainty, a test of courage she could not ignore. At dawn, the canyon glimmered with muted colors, reds and oranges bleeding across jagged cliffs, shadows stretching long and sharp. Tay finally spoke, his voice low and deliberate, carrying over the crisp morning air. He asked little, observing more than questioning, yet every word was chosen with care, as if gauging Leora's resilience with the subtlest of probes. She answered cautiously, revealing just enough of her story to show understanding without betraying fear. In those exchanges, a silent dialogue formed, a negotiation of trust, a careful dance that neither fully controlled but both depended upon. As they moved deeper into the canyon, the tension between them remained, layered with new challenges. Leora noticed the tracks of other travelers, some recent, some old, crossing their path. Each track was a mystery. Who had walked these trails before, and why had they disappeared into the vast expanse? She wondered if she might one day follow such paths herself, or if danger waited around every bend. Meanwhile, Tay's thoughts lingered on the threats beyond their immediate view, rival clans, wild predators, and the unpredictability of the land itself. Even in moments of silence, the canyon seemed to hum with danger, reminding them both that survival demanded constant awareness. Tay's people, though absent for now, loomed large in the edges of Leora's imagination. She could sense their presence in the markings etched into the cliffs, the smoke curling from distant fire pits, and in Tay's careful movements. There was a rhythm to his life she did not yet understand, a code that governed behavior and choice. For Leora, this was both fascinating and intimidating. She realized that her survival depended not only on courage, but on learning to read the land, the people, and the unspoken rules that bound them together. Every glance, every gesture, carried lessons she had to absorb quickly. The first hours of their journey revealed small tests and quiet dramas. Leora's horse balked at a narrow ledge, forcing her to confront her fear directly, while Tay guided with patience, his presence a mixture of command and subtle reassurance. She noticed the intricacies of his actions, the way he scanned the horizon, adjusted his pace to the terrain, and anticipated challenges before they appeared. With every obstacle, she felt herself growing sharper, more aware, yet the uncertainty never lessened. Behind every ridge, in every shadow, danger or change could emerge without warning. By midday, the canyon opened onto a wide mesa, offering a view of the land's vastness. The plains stretched to the horizon, dotted with rocky outcrops and distant streams that glimmered in sunlight. Leora felt awe, but also unease. Here the world seemed endless, indifferent to her fears, and yet brimming with potential. Tay remained quiet, his eyes tracing lines across the horizon, measuring risks and opportunities as if the land itself spoke to him. She realized that in this vast, untamed world, their fates were intertwined, not by choice, but by circumstance, and that the trials ahead would test them both in ways neither could predict. As the sun dipped low, shadows stretching like reaching fingers across the mesa, Leora sensed the canyon's heartbeat alive, unpredictable and full of hidden stories. The wind carried distant sounds, faint drums perhaps, or the echo of far-off voices, leaving her unsettled and alert. Every step forward was a step deeper into a mystery. Every glance exchanged with Tay, a reminder that the unknown lay ahead. And in that lingering tension, one truth became clear. Her journey was only beginning, and the choices she made next would shape more than her fate. They would shape the balance between fear, trust, and survival in a land that held no guarantees. The wind had grown sharper as the day waned, sweeping across the plateau like a living thing. Leora felt it biting at her cheeks and through the layers of her cloak, reminding her that the frontier spared no one. Tay rode beside her, silent as always, yet every line of his body radiated awareness, strength, and the faintest hint of unease. They had been on the trail for days, traversing canyons, rocky ridges, and sun-baked plains. And though they had faced no immediate threat, the tension in the air had thickened, as though the land itself anticipated a storm. Leora's heart beat in rhythm with the distant drum of unseen forces, and she felt a strange exhilaration mingled with dread. The mesas rose ahead like ancient guardians, jagged and unforgiving. Leora's horse shied nervously at the approach, and she steadied herself, gripping the reins tightly. Her eyes flicked to Tay, whose gaze never wavered from the horizon. There was something he had sensed, something beyond the ordinary dangers of the plains. Perhaps a rival clan moving quietly, or a predator lurking unseen. Leora could feel the tension radiating from him, a taut energy that demanded she be equally vigilant. The girl's courage had grown since the journey began, yet in this moment she understood the fragility of human strength against the vast, wild expanse. They had entered a narrow pass when a shadow moved at the edge of their vision. Leora froze, and even Tay's horse shifted beneath him. The shadow flickered again, and a faint whisper of movement carried through the air. Tay lifted a hand, signaling her to stay silent. Leora's pulse quickened. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could it be another traveler, a threat, or merely the play of wind and light? Every instinct screamed caution, yet she could not pull her eyes away from the looming cliffs that seemed to hold secrets of their own. As they pressed forward, the tension escalated. Small signs became more deliberate broken branches, scuffed dust, the faintest echo of voices carried on the wind. Leora's thoughts returned to the stories she had been told of the plains, of survival measured by instinct, of danger often arriving without warning, and of the courage needed to meet it. She felt the weight of her own decisions pressing upon her. Every movement, every glance mattered now. And yet the fear that had once threatened to overwhelm her had transformed into something sharper, a kind of readiness that demanded she face what lay ahead without faltering. Tay remained a pillar of calm, but even he was not immune to the tension building around them. He could sense the shifting patterns of the land, the subtle disturbances that spoke of hidden eyes watching their passage. He had walked these lands for years, yet today brought a sense of urgency unlike any other. Leora's presence, though quiet, had changed the rhythm of his journey. And he felt a responsibility heavier than any weapon or skill he had ever mastered. Every decision mattered. Every action carried weight, and he knew that the coming hours would test them both in ways that could alter their lives forever. The sun dipped lower, casting the canyon into a deepening shadow, and a chill ran down Leora's spine. They had reached a plateau where the land fell away sharply on either side, and the wind carried strange echoes from the distance. Tay dismounted, moving with a careful precision born of years surviving the unforgiving frontier. Leora followed, her horse reluctantly grazing the sparse grass at the edge. The canyon walls seemed to close in around them, jagged and towering, and she felt the full magnitude of their isolation. In the silence, even the soft shuffle of their boots sounded like a drumbeat, announcing them to forces unseen. Suddenly a cry pierced the air, sound distant yet immediate, wild yet human. Leora's heart leaped and she grabbed Tay's arm for support. He scanned the terrain swiftly, muscles coiled, eyes sharp. The sound came again, closer now, a reminder that the world beyond their small circle of safety was unpredictable and dangerous. Shadows flickered at the edges of the cliffs, and the canyon itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would unfold. Leora realized that the journey she had begun in fear had evolved into a trial of skill, patience, and courage, and that each moment now carried stakes higher than she had ever imagined. Tay motioned her to move cautiously, and they advanced, the sound of the cries growing clearer. Leora's senses were on fire. She felt every shift of wind, every movement of rock, every distant rustle in the brush. The land was alive with possibility, each detail a clue, each shadow a potential threat. And as they reached the edge of the plateau, the view opened into a wide valley bathed in fading light. Smoke curled faintly from hidden fires, and figures moved in the distance, silhouettes against the amber horizon. Leora's pulse raced as she realized that their path forward was fraught with peril, yet it also hinted at answers and resolutions just out of reach. She glanced at Tay, whose face remained unreadable yet resolute. He had guided her this far, had taught her to move with caution, to watch, to listen, and to trust the land as much as herself. The bond between them, forged in the crucible of the frontier, was stronger than either had anticipated. Yet even with that connection, the uncertainty remained. The figures in the valley, the cries carried on the wind, the looming shadows of cliffs and canyon walls, all pointed to a challenge that neither could ignore. Leora tightened her grip on the reins, her eyes fixed on the valley below, and felt the electricity of the moment surge through her. Every instinct, every lesson, every ounce of courage would be tested before the night ended. The sun slipped entirely behind the horizon, leaving only the glow of twilight and the faint shimmer of stars above. Leora's heart pounded with anticipation, a mixture of fear and readiness. She and Tay stood at the edge of a precipice, both literal and metaphorical, knowing that the moments ahead would shape the course of everything. The cries grew louder, the shadows more distinct, and the winds seemed to whisper secrets they could barely understand. The stage was set for confrontation, revelation, and the final test of courage. And in that tense silence, Leora understood that the story she had begun in fear was about to reach its most critical hour. The twilight deepened, but the valley below no longer seemed threatening. The figures that had once cast long shadows now revealed themselves as travelers, weary but unarmed, moving toward the distant fires with purpose. Leora felt a cautious relief, though she did not let her guard down. Tay's eyes, sharp and vigilant, never left the horizon, yet there was a faint softness in his gaze as he glanced at her. He had guided her through the worst of uncertainty, through fear and shadow, and in this moment, the tension that had weighed on both of them began to ease. Leora lowered her reins, allowing her horse to graze quietly on the sparse grass. The girl felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a mixture of exhaustion and the thrill of survival. Every step she had taken on this journey had shaped her, and now the frontier felt less like a threat and more like a teacher. She realized that courage was not simply an act, but a companion she could carry even when the path was unclear. Tay's presence beside her had been a steadying force, a reminder that strength could be both fierce and protective. For the first time since leaving her home, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of hope. The valley opened wider as they descended, and the travelers ahead recognized them with cautious curiosity. Leora noticed their wary expressions, and she understood that the frontier had shaped everyone they encountered, carving lines of mistrust and self-preservation into even the kindest faces. Yet the recognition of Tay's leadership, the calm authority he carried, brought reassurance to the others. Leora, too, felt that reassurance, a quiet understanding that they were not alone in this vast and challenging land. There were allies to be found, even in the harshest corners, and trust, once earned, was a gift stronger than any weapon. As they approached the campfires, the air shifted from tension to cautious camaraderie. Leora's heart lifted when she saw children playing near the edges of the flames, their laughter fragile but alive against the fading light. For a moment she allowed herself to imagine a life where such moments could exist freely where the frontiers. Harshness did not press so heavily on every choice. She glanced at Tay, whose expression had softened entirely now, and felt a quiet gratitude for the guidance and protection he had offered. He had been more than a warrior. He had been a teacher, a guardian, and in the unspoken way of the plains, a friend. Night settled over the valley, and the stars emerged, brilliant against the endless sky. Leora and Tay sat near one of the fires, the warmth cutting through the chill of the evening. The girl reflected on the journey, the fear that had gripped her heart, the moments of doubt and hesitation, and the courage she had discovered within herself. She realized that her fate, once feared as a cage, had led her to a new understanding of strength, resilience, and human connection. The Apache warrior, fierce and enigmatic, had shown her that even in a land as untamed as this, compassion and respect could exist alongside strength and survival. As the fire crackled, Tay spoke softly, his voice carrying the weight of years and experience. He told stories of the land, of the mountains and rivers, of lessons learned in silence and in observation. Leora listened, captivated not only by the words, but by the calm authority in his tone. She realized that knowledge of the frontier was more than maps or trails. It was a wisdom of life itself, of patience, endurance, and understanding one's place in a world both beautiful and harsh. In the warmth of the firelight, she felt a sense of belonging she had never known, and for the first time the thought of future days did not fill her with fear. In the days that followed, Leora learned more of the people she had once only known from stories. She observed their routines, their rituals, and the ways they moved with the land rather than against it. She discovered that bravery could take many forms, not only in facing danger, but in the quiet decisions to help, to trust, and to build community. Tay remained by her side, a steady guide and protector, and the bond between them grew not from force or fear, but from mutual respect and shared experience. Leora realized that life on the frontier demanded both vigilance and openness, and that she had found a balance she could carry into whatever lay ahead. The final morning arrived with soft golden light spilling across the plains. Leora stood at the edge of the plateau, looking out over the vast expanse she had traversed. The journey had changed her, carving away hesitation and fear, replacing it with confidence and a quiet joy. She glanced at Tay, whose gaze met hers with a shared understanding. The trials were behind them, and the future, though uncertain, held promise. The warrior's hand rested briefly on her shoulder, a gesture of acknowledgement and solidarity, and Leora felt the fullness of safety and trust in that simple contact. As they descended together toward the life of the camp, Leora knew that her story was no longer defined by fear or circumstance. She had been sold to a fearsome warrior, yet through courage, resilience, and unexpected guidance, she had discovered freedom, belonging, and hope. The plains no longer seemed threatening, but alive with possibility, and she understood that the journey itself had been the greatest lesson of all. With the sun rising higher, the fires flickering warmly, and the horizon wide and open before her, Leora took her first steps into the life she could now call her own. A life shaped by strength, guided by trust, and filled with the promise of new beginnings.